Welcome to Thrive Radio. I'm your host, Amy Montgomery, entrepreneur and founder of A Call to Thrive, a strategic brand and growth studio. Today, my guest is Adam Dickinson. He's the founder of Adam Dickinson LLC. And after a successful career with the FBI, Adam took an unexpected path, combined analytics, decision frameworks, and intuitive practices to help people navigate major life and career transitions. Today, Adam works with professionals who feel stuck, burnout, or uncertain about what's next, helping them bridge the gap between logic and intuition so they can make decisions they truly trust. Today, we're talking about career transitions, personal transformation, intuition, identity, decision-making, and what it really takes to move forward when life no longer fits who you've become. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into everything that you do because it's so fascinating. And most people don't expect that somebody in the that's former FBI professional to be talking about intuition, and also now a caustic record. And
Yeah.
you're going to have to talk a little bit about that. So can you talk about the beginning and how did this evolution start?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate the question. For me, I started with the FBI doing terrorism analysis and then switched over. I did that for a couple years and then switched over doing counterintelligence. So looking at espionage issues where people started to steal things they weren't supposed to, and looked at those issues. And midway through that program, that was probably midpoint of my career, I ran through or experienced a painful life event where I had someone very important to me. We separated, and through that breakup, I started to go inward. I started to meditate, started to observe my inner awareness a lot more than I did because I was very analytically wired, very head driven.
Okay.
And that breakup essentially created a moment where things logically didn't make sense anymore. So I had to go inward, start to trust myself intuitively. I did to some degree, but not to the degree that I do now. And from that journey, it was also wanting to get clear on my purpose, which is to show others how to integrate logic and intuition to make aligned decisions where they feel that they have more autonomy and agency over their lives. And eventually I got introduced to the Akashic Records. To me, how it was described to me, well, first let me explain and define what it is. Essentially, it's your soul's energetic library of information that you have access to at all times. You just have to know how to witness it and observe it. And through a meditative state, you can access it at any time. And when it was described to me, I was really looking for a lot of answers. I was still trying to heal. And the way it came into my life at that point, it sounded like, well, this is like a treasure map to all the answers you could ever want. Like, who wouldn't want that? Especially because I was very much hurting and trying to heal and so forth. So logically, I was like, well, this makes a lot of sense. And I was also integrating my purpose and meditation. So all those things started to overlap. And I'm like, well, this tool, I use it as a tool. It just made sense for me coming from the intelligence community and the FBI. I use it as an additional data source when I'm making decisions and when I'm supporting clients. And from there, it just sort of picked up. I use it on a day-to-day basis whenever I'm making, maybe a minor decision to a huge decision. But maybe I'll just pause there because I can go in a lot of different routes with that. But that's sort of the backstory behind it all.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, that's a different level of intuition, that most people are used to, and especially for those that are analytical. So, and what was the moment that you realized the traditional logic alone wasn't enough to help people make the meaningful decisions? And was it something that you experienced through that, or that you just got a breakthrough with, or what was it?
Yeah, I think it was a mixture of always like wanting to find a solution. And I'm an individual that's always taking action and wanting to figure it out. And with that in mind, for whatever reason, maybe it was sort of divine timing of some sorts, but when I was trying to heal in the very beginning stages of going inward, I couldn't find a therapist that really resonated. It was hard to talk to individuals about this breakup, and even trying to solve it on my own, it was difficult. I had some friends, but eventually I felt like I was sort of burdening them with all of my venting and trying to figure it out. So there came a point where I really wanted to start to lead myself versus depending on other people. And that was sort of the aha moment. I really didn't want to depend on a therapist. I really didn't want to depend on other people. I wanted to have this inner sovereignty and agency to start leading myself. And especially from a spiritual point of view, I wanted to really step into the best version of myself. And I really didn't know how to do that logically, because really, I don't think the answers you can come up with logically if you want to go down a path that is for your best interest, because logically you can't know all the answers. So eventually I
That's
decided.
messing with me. That statement's messy with me because I'm really logical.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Well,
No, I was actually thinking about yesterday. I was frustrated with people because I am also a problem solver.
yeah.
So I'm probably in that, and I'm very logical. And I like in business, for example, I do not approach things emotionally.
Yeah.
I'm very logical, and I think in systems and patterns.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, here's the pattern, here's the system, here's how we solve the problem.
Right.
Why is everyone being emotional about it? It's not an emotion.
Sure. Yeah. I totally understand that, and that definitely makes sense. I think I've very much in a similar way. My sort of unlock, and if I may build upon that,
Yeah.
for me, emotions are part of the inner intelligence that we all have, and I use them sort of as signposts
Okay.
versus sort of suppressing or not paying attention to or accepting your emotions. But they're usually just sort of guidelines to where you're at and where you can move into. And so with that, with emotions and the other sort of somatic signals that you can receive, and then the intuitive messages that you can receive, there's like this entire other realm of information that's available to you. You just have to know how to access it. And so a lot of times, even like after my breakup, I couldn't see a solution. I couldn't get out of my own sort of self-imposed cage that I was in. I just felt like I was in a rock and a hard place and was just experiencing the same issues over and over again. So I had to find another sort of solution, which I couldn't observe with my five senses. So I had to go in a different route to figure out what was next.
That's interesting. I like that because then it kind of just automatically takes you out of your current limitation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, spot on, because when I'm working with clients, the intent of incorporating my Akashic Records practice into it is to help them release those limitations and reframe the limitations in a way that's for their highest good and highest good for everyone. So it already sort of raises the bar, raises the perspective, raises the vibration, if you want to use that word, for a different path.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you work with the highly analytical environments and then the deeply intuitive spaces.
Mm-hmm.
What do those two worlds get wrong about each other, do you think? What are the...
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe I'll start with the more logical side. I think you had hinted at it before, but there is this part of emotional, I guess, neglect, emotional suppression, because the emotions and bodily sensations and intuition are somewhat foreign. And the folks that I work with, I would describe as someone has more of a beginner level intuition, meaning they sometimes know what it's telling them, they sometimes pay attention, they sometimes follow it, but the biggest sort of issue is they don't always trust it. They don't know what the clear signal is telling them. And so as a result, what I find, logic can only get you to a certain reach. It can only get you to a certain level, if you will. And similarly, on the intuitive side, I found, being heavily involved in the intuitive community, that structure and planning is missing. So they definitely complement one another. But sometimes, like for example, I've been involved with a community that's very, I'll call it non-pushing culture, meaning I've had supposed to have one meeting with someone, and if she feels like the resonance or the energy is off with whomever or the topic, she'll reschedule just because she doesn't want to push an agenda, or she doesn't want to push expectations. So there's like a feeling of ease for sure, but there's also somewhat of a delay resolving whatever we need to talk about. So there's not a feeling of forward movement. There's like a constant sort of shift in the energy, which is
Yeah.
fine and totally works. But I found sometimes those intuitives who don't integrate as much organization or structure or planning seem to be more in a, how would I put this? I don't want to say a stalemate, but kind of like just a calming sort of
Type
wandering.
B, like
Yeah,
a type B,
yeah,
right? Of just
sure.
whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and
Yeah.
there are definite grade or ranges to that,
Yeah.
but generally, yeah, that's some of the challenges I've seen on the intuitive side.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, no, I think that resonates a lot. I think I'm equal 50-50, left brain, right brain, equal
Mm,
spiritual and scientific. So I'm kind of unusual in that way.
mm-hmm.
But I have to purposely shift what brain I'm, and if I'm working in one for like it intensely,
Right.
then I can't jump into the other one.
Yeah, it's
That makes
difficult.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I can't. I feel like with art, I know this sounds strange, but the spiritual artistic side, I feel like I have to think deeper.
Uh-huh.
You
100%.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similarly, if I can add to that, what I've experienced when I'm giving Akashic record readings, I work with clients sometimes who like to talk through their questions when they want to go into their own records when I'm translating their records. And when I'm doing that, I have to be present. So I'm using my conscious mind to hear their question. I repeat back to them what I heard, and then I have to use more subconscious abilities to go into their records and observe the answer. So I have to switch back and forth, and it's very challenging.
That's interesting. Now, is that like similar to being like I'm an empath, so I can feel people's emotions. So is that
Mhm.
similar?
Yeah, similar. I would say it's a more of a precision tool
Okay.
because when I'm in someone's records, I have my job and responsibility is to maintain the integrity of the information that's coming through, which often for my style is comes the answers come through in imagery or metaphors, because
Interesting.
I'm describing the energetic nature of the answer to the client's question.
Fascinating. I've totally experienced that. I just label it differently.
Yeah, 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 sure.
No, yeah, no. I think it's so interesting. Yeah, I like this conversation. So, what are the signs someone has outgrown their current identity but hasn't realized it yet?
Yeah, sure. So I would say a couple things. One, boredom. If they're used to having sort of a routine, but they're not really being challenged anymore, it's becoming sort of safe, familiar. That's definitely one signal. For sure. I think also if you are, and I've experienced this myself and with some of my clients that I've worked with, is that they encounter the same problems over and over again. Usually, when I'm working with someone who runs into this sort of loop of roadblocks, there is some kind of either a growth moment that's being asked, just because of the resistance that they keep experiencing is typically a signal that they've sort of met the threshold of who they've become, and there's their inner intelligence, or the that you could describe it as the best version of themselves, is essentially asking them to step into a growth phase and move into a more expanded version. Also, I found that if aside from challenges, if there is an intense event that happens, like a breakup or illness or something like that, where the person is unable to effectively thrive and they go back into survival mode, that is also sort of an indicator that there's like an internal sort of, how would I describe it? I guess an internal signal or indication that there's more to the human experience that you can grow into.
Mhm.
And there's essentially just an expansion moment.
Interesting. Yeah,
But,
I like
but
that.
happy to elaborate.
No, I like that perspective too, because I think that when you kind of go into like, fight or flight mode, or, kind of get stuck or whatever it may be, it feels really limiting, right? And
Hmm.
so I like that thought that that's when it's time to expand,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
essentially.
Yeah. So you've described helping people move from confusion to clarity? What do you think usually keeps people stuck?
Well, a lot of things. I think with one area in particular is relying on one data source, which for my ideal client, it's relying on logic all the time, and there's a sense of push. There's a push. Whereas when you start to incorporate more of that intuitive side, you can engage more of the pull of the energy. So it's kind of like a navigating the push and pull of life and being in that flow state. But oftentimes, either if it's through fear or a need for certainty or some kind of limiting belief, which is typically led by logical reasoning of some kind, there's just a feeling of stuckness. There's also another sort of scenario when I found that people who are experiencing a sense of stuckness is they are having, how would I put it, a sense of loss of identity. Like, for example, when I left the FBI, I had a moment where I had to rebuild who I was internally. I had to release my attachment to the FBI. I had to release expectations of who I was internally, how I engaged with myself and with others as I left that very structured identity. And when you do that, there's this like liminal period where you're feeling maybe lost or stuck, unless you have the tools to help navigate yourself. So when you go through a very deep transformation and identity shift, there can be also a feeling of stuckness because it's very sort of be very scary. A very uncertainty is definitely high.
Yeah, no, I like that. That resonates. That resonates a lot with me. I think I mentioned to you about me being sick. I was really sick. I was sick for 23 years, slow death.
Yeah.
And I finally healed myself, but I never was able during that time to be my true self because I was in fight or flight because my body was trying to stay alive, right? So it was
Right.
impossible for me not to. And but I've definitely experienced that a little bit, like realizing who I am.
Yeah.
And you kind of go, but at the same time, I'm like, I can't do it fast because my body, is healing. Like now, I have all my energy back, but I can't spend all of my energy because I don't recover. I don't recover, so I have to and that's hard for me.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, that just totally resonates on a deep level. And I've noticed working with businesses, some of the stuff that you're saying, people deal with the same thing in business. Like they outgrow their business, they might offer a certain service, and they realize people aren't seeing me for my value. They don't see everything I can offer because they realize that they're more than just what's listed on their website,
Right.
or they realize they want to do something deeper or whatever it may be. So I've noticed that in business, and it's the same. I think it's kind of along the same reason why people are struggling, in their identity, right? Because it's kind of a similar thing. I feel like business, when you have your own business, it's such a personal thing. How have you seen that? Have you seen that at all in your work? Have you worked with any business owners or those that are kind of walking through that?
Yeah. In particular, well, one individual that comes to mind, she is looking to scale and with her business, and she was an amazing lady that had a lot of ideas and wasn't quite sure how to filter out the noise versus the true signal that would resonate with her. And she wanted to expand into or scale her business to do more that gave her joy, gave her excitement, but she wasn't sure which direction to go. And so she was moving into this identity that was more purposeful, that was more intentional versus trying to do all the things at once. And so what happened is I worked with her to refine the path intuitively first. That was the strongest signal to move in this particular direction. And then I helped her logically. We went through various analytic frameworks and exercises to help with that execution to step into that new identity. But yeah, that's one person, that a business owner that comes to mind. She wanted to do more with her work, but she also didn't want to feel spread thin. And so helping her sort of clarify and refine her next direction.
Yeah, and that's tough too, because when you start to say you want to increase revenue, a lot of people think, oh, I can just outsource that. That's just more marketing. Like it starts to challenge you. You start to feel overwhelmed, like there's so many things to, think about.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you think entrepreneurs underestimate intuition because they're taught to rely only on data? And with that, I want to say I do really heavily rely on intuition, but sometimes I feel like my intuition, whatever I thought it was the direction, I feel like it's almost like I have to wait forever for that proof to eventually come.
Uh-huh.
Versus the data.
Right. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because if I'm hearing you, it's the with the question and some of the entrepreneurs that I have as colleagues and even clients too, they do rely on their intuition to some degree, but continuous trust in it is a larger issue, and it's something I advise on is how to maintain that sort of continuous momentum with following through on their intuition, even though logically you don't see any sort of data points that back it up.
Yeah.
And there's a couple techniques on how to do that, but I'd say the biggest one is this component of self-trust and of self-love. Often what I have found with myself and when I'm advising clients is the intuitive side is so what's the right word, is so unfamiliar, is very uncomfortable. It can be abstract, it can be not very tangible, and so that aspect alone, it feels like it's fleeting. You're not able to get a grasp of it, and so you have to essentially maintain this ability to consistently be, I would say, patient, comfortable with the uncertainty, and navigating not only the bodily information, the emotional information, but especially the intuitive information that add more granularity to the intuitive signals that are coming through to help with your decisions. But yeah, most of the entrepreneurs that I talk to aren't either familiar with how to do that, or they're just don't feel like they can trust it at all, and so they move on to something that they can tangibly see as a logical data point.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like, one of the strongest things that you can do, especially as a business, if you're a business owner, is just you have to believe, right? So, what happens when someone finally stops trying to be who they think they should be and starts showing up who they really are?
Yeah, I mean, you can see it on their face, like especially their nonverbals kind of shine through, I think, immediately when they start to step into who they really are. The excitement comes forward, the joy comes forward, and the peace comes forward. And I think even with myself and with the people I've supported, there's also a sense of peace, a sense of a greater self-confidence, and things just start to become, I want to say easier, but just more in flow. Challenges become more manageable. They become much more giving sort of texture to the experience of life,
Yeah.
and where you can become more present with the current moment and enjoy sort of the adventure that we're all. And I think if you're out of alignment or not really in this moment with who you truly are and how you operate, you could feel like you're just alone all the time, or you could feel like you're observing but not really doing anything. You feel lost, maybe, like all these different sensations that could be happening. But when you're fully acting from a sense of greater intention with yourself and the collective, if you will, there's an excitement about that, and you can really step into and lean into those uncomfortable moments when you need it.
I like that. It made me think of, I just met with one of my clients that she's a leadership coach, but she's associated with a large organization and she doesn't feel aligned with necessarily the brand. And I have
Mm,
a program that, yeah. And she's like, it just doesn't feel like me. So I'm going through a deep exercise with her where I'm like, okay, what feels authentic to you? What doesn't feel authentic to you? What feels fake online? She
yeah.
doesn't like social media. Feels like most of it's narcissistic, all of this. And I'm like, great. So what we need to do is keep you very focused on, and she doesn't want her personal life out there, all that. I'm like, we just need to keep you, what what do people need to know about you for you to serve them with what you have to offer?
Right.
And what are, let's show your best traits on
Right.
purpose, and what do you want
Yeah.
to be remembered for? And kind of bringing her through that journey and how to communicate her brand without it feeling not, like off, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because people
Yeah.
can
So
feel
it's
that for
similar.
sure.
Yeah, and like I think that a lot of people deal with that with social media. I know I definitely did. Like I went through this. I kind of brought myself through it first, and at first I was like, okay, first I would like print out this piece of paper. I'm like, this is what I've got to say. But then I'm like, then I felt perfectionism. Like I have to say what's on the paper, and I can't do that. It's better if I speak from my heart. So then finally I had to like get the message in my heart and then just speak it.
Yeah.
Whether it resonated or not, oh well, right? As
Yeah.
long as I'm speaking. But then I feel like it's such a process. It's really similar too, of like, when people say show up authentically, what does that even mean? It doesn't mean like you don't have to show every area of your life if you don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of people, feel that pressure.
For
So
sure.
one of your most fascinating topics is helping people distinguish between intuition and anxiety. And I absolutely love this, by the way, because I used
Yeah.
to deal with this a lot. From your perspective, what is the difference?
Yeah, I think it generally comes down to the feeling, the outcome or result, and how you're experiencing the information. So, meaning if you are experiencing erratic sort of perception of the activity or the event or the decision, if it's pushing, if it's constantly making you question yourself, if it's chaotic, if it's urgent, anything essentially involving fear or lack or limitation, it's essentially anxiety. Whereas if it is coming from a sense of calm, if it's quick and light, if it's firm, if it's supportive, if it's kind of like I would describe as like a warm, energetic blanket that's giving you that support, that's intuition. And they very much have a certain way of giving a certain result that you can keep going around in circles over and over again, which is anxiety. But if you're in a fully alignment with your intuition, you can have that sort of intuitive message and then gracefully act on it and move on. There's not like an attachment to the information where you start to question it over and over again, and it's like a constant loop. There's also like the aspect of how it feels. Intuition is meant to be peaceful and serene and calm. And when you're acting from that decision point, you're able to navigate even the toughest of problems. But anxiety kind of prolongs the issue. You can even spiral. It just adds more fear, more lack, and more limitation to what you're experiencing.
So, how do you help people that are skeptical of intuition being and exploring it?
Yeah, I would say probably first is experiencing a Akashic record reading with me, or depending on where they are in their journey. So if someone is maybe needing some direction, they can work with me through an Akashic record reading to gain clarity on their topic of interest. But if they're wanting to do a more advanced work, they can work with me and some of my strategic partners. So one of my programs is when someone is ready to go through an identity shift and do that inner transformation. I am kind of the bridge between the intuitive and the logical. So I will essentially send them off to my strategic partners to learn more advanced techniques. So, for example, I don't teach my clients the Akashic records, but I would send them off to my teacher. Similarly, I don't necessarily am not as well versed in foresight, but I have a strategic partner that does futures thinking and foresight work. So if individuals either want to learn either skill, but mainly, if they want to strengthen their intuitive side, I can work with them to figure out how they want to up-level their decision making toolkit. And I work with them to make sure that once they have this knowledge, then we can start to put it into action and they can start to go on their own. And then I can send them off and they go out into the real world again. But essentially, when people are working with me, it's either where are you at on your journey? Do you need clarity first? Or are you ready to do more of the hard stuff and have that more advanced sort of curriculum?
I love that. So I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
What's your truth that's gotten you this far in your journey?
I would say following that energetic pull, there's always been an aspect of my trust that has led me to my next decision. So, meaning when I was in high school, I knew I didn't want to stay in my hometown. It just felt right. Similarly, when I was in college, I knew I didn't want to go into med school. Instead, I decided to follow my passion for the Chinese language, where I wanted to become bilingual, and then which led me to the FBI. And then when I was in the FBI last year in 2025, when things were changing, I knew it was time for me to leave. And it's always been at times a very faint sort of feeling. But as I now, last year, when it was such a huge change, 15 years in the FBI to leaving it, I had to do additional work, intuitive work, to make sure I was on the right path. But yeah, it's always sort of the through line with me is following that energetic pull.
I love that. I love that. And Adam, if people are listening and they're interested in what you do and where to contact you, what's the best place to go to learn more?
Yeah, so if you're in the middle of a career transition or a personal shift and want more clarity in your next steps, you can connect with me on LinkedIn at my moniker is Adam-R-Dickinson, or visit my website at www.adamrdickinson.com. Feel free to fill out an application there, and excited to work with you. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me either way.
Perfect. I'll put all those links down below. Adam, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your expertise.
Yes, thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate it. I love the conversation today.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're listening, you want more information about this podcast and upcoming shows, you can visit acalltothrive.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week.